Hey Harold Hornets, how is everyone on this Tuesday afternoon? Had a rough, rainy morning today. Had a few leaks in the building and had to run around here trying to get everything squared away. Got some good news, exciting news. Those that will be returning to Harold, it looks like we are finally starting to get some playground installation going. They've got everything outside and here. So hopefully I'll get to send some pics out and keep you guys updated. Maybe read outside one day if it doesn't get too hot. But I want to dive right in and make sure that we're covering a couple chapters today. And we've still got quite a few to go. And let's see where Melody is at this point. So we ended with her trying to get a McDonald's, trying to eat a burger and fries, and having communication issues. Remember, Dad's a little bit harder at picking up on things. Mom seems to kind of understand what Melody is trying to say. So chapter 11 is where we will begin of Out of My Mind. Here we go. Fifth grade started a few weeks ago, and a couple of cool things have happened. Well, I didn't get a gadget that makes Garfield-like speech bubbles over my head, but I did get an electric wheelchair, and our school began something called inclusion classes. I thought that was funny. I've never been included in anything, but these classes are supposed to give kids like me a chance to interact with what everybody else calls the normal students. What's normal? Duh! Comparing my new chair to my old one is like comparing a Mercedes to a skateboard. The wheels are almost like car tires, which makes the ride smooth and easy, like riding on pillows. I can't go very fast, but I can propel myself down the hall with just a little lever on the handrail. Or if I flip to the switch to manual, I can still be pushed if necessary. When Freddie first saw it, he shouted, "Woohoo!" like I just won the Indy 500. Melly goes zoom zoom now. Want a race? He spun his own chair in excited circles around me. I'm sure he could beat me, even at the subatomic speed our chairs are set to. My electric chair is a lot heavier than my manual chair, and it's almost impossible for Mom and Dad to lift anywhere. When you decide to switch to a rocket ship for transportation, Dad joked at first, rubbing his back, you're going to need to hire Superman to get it in the car. I grinned, but I know he saw the thanks in my eyes. So he bought a set of portable wheelchair ramps that fold and fit in the back of our SUV. With those, he can roll the new chair into the back of our car and still have back muscles left over. For me, it's all about the freedom. Now I don't have to wait for somebody to move me across the room. I can just go there. Nice. So when they decided to start mainstreaming us into regular classes, the electric chair was really helpful. Our fifth grade teacher in room H5 reminds me of a television grandmother. Mrs. Shannon is pudgy, wears lavender body lotion every single day, and I think she must be from the South because she talks with a real strong drawl. Somehow it makes everything she says seem more interesting. She told us on the first day, I'm gonna bust a gut making sure y'all get all you can out of this school year. You hear? We're gonna read and learn and grow. I believe every one of y'all got potential all stuffed inside, and together we're gonna try to make some of that stuff shine. I liked her. She brought in stacks of new books to read to us, as well as games and music and videos. Unlike Mrs. Billups, Mrs. Shannon must have read all our records because she dusted off the headphones and even brought in more books on tape for me. Y'all ready for music class? She asked us one morning. Let's get this inclusion stuff going. I jerked with excitement. As the aides helped us down the hall to the music room, I wondered if I'd get to sit next to a regular kid. What if I did something stupid? What if Willie yodeled or Carl farted? Maria was likely to blurt out something crazy. Would this be our only chance? What if we mess this up? I could barely contain myself. We were going to be in a regular classroom. The music teacher, Mrs. Lovelace, had been the first to volunteer to open her class to us. The music room was huge, almost twice as large as our classroom. My hands got sweaty. The kids in there were mostly fifth graders too. They'd probably be surprised to know that I knew all their names. I've watched them on the playground at lunch and at recess for years. My classmates sit under a tree and catch a breeze while they play kickball or tag, so I know who they are and how they work. I doubted if they knew any of us by name, though. Well, the whole thing was almost a disaster. Willie, probably upset and scared about being in a new room, started yelping at the top of his lungs. Jill began to cry. She held tightly to the hand grips of her walker and refused to move past the doorway. I wanted to disappear. All of the normal children in the music class, I guess about 30 of them, turned to stare. Some of them laughed, others looked away, but one girl in the back row crossed her arms across her chest and scowled at her classmates who were acting up. Two girls, Molly and Claire, everyone knew them because they were mean to almost everybody on the playground, mimicked Willie. They made sure they stayed just out of sight of the teacher. But I saw it. So did Willie. "Hey, Claire," Molly said, twisting her arms above her head and bending her body so it looked crooked. "Look at me. I'm a retard." She laughed so hard she snorted snot. Claire cracked up as well, then let spit dribble out of her mouth. "Dubba wubba," she said, crossing her eyes and pretending to slip out of her chair. Mrs. Lovelace finally noticed them because she said sternly, "Stand up, please, Claire." "I didn't do anything," Claire replied. "You stand as well, Molly," Mrs. Lovelace added. "We were just laughing," Molly said defensively, but she stood up next to Claire. Mrs. Lovelace took both girls' chairs and slid them over to the wall. "Why'd you do that?" Claire cried out in protest. "You have perfectly good bodies and legs that work. Use them," Mrs. Lovelace instructed. "You can't make us stand the whole class," Claire moaned. "The Board of Education requires that I teach you music. There is nothing in the rule book that requires you sit down while I do it. Now stand there and be quiet, or I'll send you to the office for showing disrespect to our guests." They stood. In the middle of the third row of chairs where everyone else was seated comfortably, they stood. This teacher is awesome. After that, things went more smoothly. Jill, who had continued to cry, had been taken back to our room by one of the aides. The rest of us sat quietly in the back of the room. Mrs. Lovelace began class once more. "I think we need a moment to gather ourselves, children." She sat down at the piano and began to play Moon River, and then she switched to the theme song from one of those new vampire movies. Oh yeah, she knew what we liked. When I started seeing the colors, I knew she was good. Forest green, lime green, emerald. I glanced over at Gloria. Instead of sitting all curled up like she usually did, her arms were outstretched like she was trying to catch the music and bring it to her. Her face was almost glowing. She began to sway with the music. Then Mrs. Lovelace completely changed tempo and played the opening notes to Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Willie clapped his hands wildly. Finally, the teacher started to play Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Dad would have loved it. Kids started to shimmy in their seats. Maria got up and started dancing. She clapped loudly, never quite on the beat, but to a rhythm that was all her own. Mrs. Lovelace paused at the end of the song. "Music is powerful, my young friends," she said. "It can connect us to memories. It can influence our mood and our responses to problems we might face." She cut her eyes at Claire and Molly, who still stood in the empty places where their chairs had been. I wanted to tell Mrs. Lovelace I liked music too. I wanted to know if she'd ever heard the song Elvira, or if she would teach us how to make our own music. I tried to raise my hand, but she didn't notice me. It must have looked like just another one of those random movements that kids like me seem to make. But I had that feeling that Mrs. Lovelace was someone who'd take the time to figure me out. The teacher went on. "Before I continue with the lesson, let's make this a real inclusion experience. Perhaps our friends from room H5 would like to sit with the rest of us instead of being stuck in the back." Freddie heard that and took his chance. He put his chair into gear and zoomed to the front of that big room and shouted, "I am Freddie. I like music. I go fast." The class laughed. I can tell the difference between people making fun of us and people being nice to us. Freddie could too, so he joined in the laughter. Mrs. Lovelace looked momentarily startled, then went over to Freddie, shook his hand, and welcomed him to the class. She sat him right there in front next to a boy named Rodney. Rodney gave Freddie a high five, and the two of them grinned at each other. Okay, I had to admit it, I was jealous. Mrs. Lovelace asked an aide to bring Gloria down front close to the piano. A girl named Elizabeth glanced at Gloria nervously, but she didn't move away when Gloria was wheeled next to her. Elizabeth's best friend is a girl named Jessica. At recess, they sit together near the fence and share granola bars. I've always wondered what they whisper about. I also noticed that everything Elizabeth does, Jessica tries to outdo. Like if Elizabeth beats her running to the fence, Jessica insists they run again so she can win too. Or if Elizabeth gets a new book bag, Jessica will have a new one the next day. So when Elizabeth started talking to Gloria, who looked terrified, Jessica raised her hand and asked if one of those H5 kids could sit next to her. Maria might have trouble figuring out some stuff, but she's a really friendly person. I want to sit by the blue shirt girl. I want to sit by the blue shirt girl, she demanded. She stomped down to Jessica's seat and sat down next to her. Then she jumped back up and gave Jessica a hug. Then she gave a hug to the kid sitting closest next to Jessica. One kid stiffened up when she touched him, but I was surprised that most of the kids let her hug them. Molly and Claire, since they were standing, had no choice. "Ooh, yuck," Claire whispered. "Cooties," Molly whispered back. Mrs. Lovelace raised an eyebrow, then cleared her throat. "It seems like you two like to stand. You'll continue to do so the rest of the week." "Oh man, this sucks," I heard Claire say. Molly had sense enough to say nothing. Maria didn't notice. She even kissed Claire on the cheek. That was funny. Willie ended up next to a large friendly boy named Connor. Ashley and Carl were absent that day, so that left me sitting in the back of the classroom by myself. The room got real quiet. I suddenly felt cold, like the air conditioning had been cranked up real high. I got goosebumps. The teacher looked around the room, expectation on her face, I guess hoping that somebody would volunteer to take me. At that moment, I would have given anything to be back in our Bluebird room instead of sitting there with 30 kids staring at me. Finally, a girl got up out of her seat and walked over to my chair. She squatted down and looked me directly in the face. Then she smiled. It was the girl with the long hair who had frowned at her friends for laughing. "I'm Rose," she said, her voice soft. I smiled back, and I tried really hard not to kick or grunt or make a noise that would scare her away. I held my breath and thought about calm, quiet things like ocean waves. It worked. I inhaled deeply and slowly, then pointed on my board to "Thank you." Rose seemed to understand. I showed her I could power my own chair, and I rolled to where she'd been sitting. We sat together for the rest of that class, and I didn't do a single embarrassing thing. It ended way too soon. But ever since, every Wednesday, our little class of outcasts gets to join Mrs. Lovelace's music class. It's awesome. Jill, Ashley, and Carl eventually became a part of the group. Each one of us has been assigned a buddy to sit next to and interact with. Once they met her, all the girls rushed to be Ashley's buddy. I think it's like playing with a pretty little doll for them, but Ashley seems to like the attention. Claire and Molly eventually got their chairs returned, but they haven't chosen to be buddies for anybody yet. That's fine with me. Elizabeth and Jessica have stuck with Gloria and Maria. Jill sits contently next to a girl named Aster Chang. Rodney actually comes over at recess and talks to Freddie. Sometimes he pushes Freddie really fast in his chair. Freddie loves that. And I get to sit with Rose every single Wednesday. On Tuesday, I can hardly sleep because I'm so excited. I make my mother pick out my nicest clothes on Wednesday morning, cool outfits like the other kids wear. I screech at her until she gets just the right combination. I make sure she brushes my teeth so my breath won't smell. I think about Rose all the time. I worry that she'll change her mind and not like me. But Rose talks to me like I understand, and she tries to figure out what I'm saying as well. One day I pointed to new and shoes and nice on my communication board, then down to her feet to let her know that I had noticed she got new sneakers and that I liked them. At first she seemed surprised that I could do this, especially since it sometimes takes me a long time to make my thoughts make sense using my board. One day I pointed to music and bad and stinky. Then I started laughing. Rose didn't get it at first, so I pointed to the words again, then pointed to Mrs. Lovelace, who was playing some kind of jazz music on the CD player. I'm like Mom, not a big jazz fan. It confuses me because it doesn't have a tune. Rose finally figured it out and said, "Oh, you don't like jazz? Me neither." We both laughed so hard, Mrs. Lovelace had to put her finger to her lips and tell us to hush. Never in my life have I ever had a teacher tell me to be quiet because I was talking to somebody in class. It was the best feeling in the world. I felt like the rest of the other kids. Rose tells me secrets sometimes. I know she bites her fingernails and she hates milk. She goes to church every Sunday, but falls asleep until it's over. Me too. She has a younger sister just like I do. She even likes country music. Sometimes she tells me about trips to the mall with her friends. It would be so tight to be able to do that. Chapter 12. By the end of October, the inclusion program has been expanded. Maria and Jill have been added to art and gym classes, and Freddie and Willie go to science. Me? It's the first time I've ever got to change classes for different subjects in my life. Now when the bell rings, instead of wondering what's happening out there in the halls, I'm out there too. It's awesome. I plow through the crowds in my electric chair like a power mower in thick grass. Sometimes kids wave or say, "What's up?" Every once in a while, someone will even walk with me to the next class. Cool. But inclusion doesn't mean I'm included in everything. I usually sit in the back of the room, going crazy because I know answers to things and I can't tell anybody. What's the definition of the word dignity? One of my teachers asked a few days ago. Of course I knew, so I raised my hand, but the teacher didn't notice the small movement I'm able to make. And even if she were to call on me, what then? I can't very well yell out the answers. It's really frustrating. During parent conferences earlier this month, my parents came in to meet Mrs. Shannon and the other teachers. Instead of leaving me on my own in a corner somewhere, Mrs. Shannon pulled me into the circle of teachers who are involved in the inclusion program. She is so great. She patted the arm of my chair and smiled. This child's got some serious smarts. She's going to be our star in this program. I did my usual screeching and kicking. I think I would have kissed her if I could, but that would have been pretty sloppy, I guess. Well, it's about time somebody recognizes what we've always known, my dad told Mrs. Shannon. We really appreciate the opportunity to let her show what she can do. Mom was especially pleased to find out I'd been assigned a mobility assistant, an aide of my own. Finally, Mom said, relief in her voice. We've been asking for this for years. Budget busting paperwork, a system that runs on grits instead of good sense. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Shannon replied, shaking her head. I'm trying to get all the students in H5 the services they need, but I smacked an aide for Melody way up to the top of my list, so we'll see how it goes. I'm expecting a wonderful school year. So cool, I tapped on my board. An aide? Wow. This person's job would be to take me to classes, sit with me, and help me participate. I wonder what she'd look like. Or maybe I'd get a guy. Would he be young and cute or old and grumpy? The very next day, my new aide was at school before I was, chatting with Mrs. Shannon in room H5 as we kids were wheeled in. She came right over to me and took my hand. Hi, Melody. I'm glad to meet you. My name is Catherine. I go to the university, and I'm going to be your deals and wheels every day. She talked to me like I was just like any other student, not a kid in a wheelchair. I tried not to kick, but it was hard to hold in my excitement. Cute t-shirt, she said as she checked out Tweety Bird on the front of the new lavender top Mom had bought me. I pointed to thanks on my board. What's your favorite color? She asked then. I pointed to purple, but then quickly slid my thumb over to green. I grinned at her. You're quick, Melody. I can see we both like weird colors. We're going to get along just fine. Catherine was dressed in purple tennis shoes, green tights, a purple suede skirt, and the ugliest green sweater I'd ever seen. I wanted to tease her about her outfit, but I didn't want her to think I was mean. After all, I just met her. I searched all over my board for a way to jokingly make fun of her clothes, but I couldn't think of a way to do it. So I gave up. It is so hard to say stuff. So now it's Catherine who helps me at lunch so I don't make a mess, and Catherine who reads off the answers I point to on my board. She's added some more words and phrases to it, and she helped Mrs. Shannon order the books I need to read. She even makes sure the headphones don't fall off my ears. The regular 5th grade language arts teacher, Miss Gordon, is not much older than Catherine. She almost explodes with energy and makes books seem like live-action plays. She jumps up on the table. Sometimes she sings. She lets the class act out parts of stories, and sometimes she even turns books into games. Vocabulary bingo, Miss Gordon announced one morning. Donuts to the winning team. As they played, my classmates broke their necks to get the right definition, screamed out answers, and groaned when they messed up. In just half an hour, every student in the room knew all 20 vocabulary words. Miss Gordon gave donuts to the losing team, too, but the winners got the ones with the chocolate sprinkles. I knew all of the definitions, but the other kids moved too fast for me. Chocolate would have made a mess on my clothes anyway. One unusually warm day this week, Miss Gordon brought in fans and spray bottles of water and let us eat popsicles in class. Orange ones, of course, in honor of Halloween, while she read poems about pumpkins and ghosts. Catherine held my popsicle for me with a paper towel under my chin. We didn't spill one drop. Miss Gordon does other cool things too. Like when she decided the class would read the story of Anne Frank, she had kids take turns squeezing into small space she had built under a table so they could understand how Anne might have felt. I couldn't do that, but I got the idea. And she's assigned other great books this semester. I'm listening to Shiloh by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor and The Giver by Lewis Lowry. And there's one called Tuck Everlasting. The kid never gets to grow up. Staying a child forever is not as cool as folks may think. Because of Mrs. V, I could actually read the books, but the print is usually very small and it's hard for my eyes to stay on the right line. And nobody has figured out the best way for me to hold on to a book without it falling on the floor a million times. So I usually choose the audiobook instead of the written version. I can even take tests now. Catherine reads me the questions and I point to the answers on the sheets she places on my tray. I pass every single test, and she doesn't help me one single bit. I would probably get 100% on each one, but some of the questions require long answers I just can't explain with the words on my board. One time, in spelling, Miss Gordon read the words aloud, and I pointed to the letters on my board. Catherine wrote down what I pointed to so I could follow along with the test. Claire and Molly, who are always watching me, it feels like, began to complain. "It's not fair," Claire cried, waving her hand to get Miss Gordon's attention. "Catherine cheats for her," Molly added. What is it with those two? It's like they're jealous of me or something, and that's just plain crazy. At the same time, I realized they actually thought I had it easier. That sure was a first. Last Monday morning, Miss Gordon told the class, as some of you may know because I do this every year, our long-range 5th grade project this year is our biography unit. We will read the biographies of famous people, do a report on a famous person of your choosing, and each of you will also write your own autobiography. Well, it's got to be short. What can you do in 11 years? Connor, the big kid, shouted. Everybody laughed. In your case, Connor, Miss Gordon replied, I'm sure you'll think of way too much. Can I do my report on the guy who invented hamburgers? Connor asked to more laughter. I doubt if we know who made the first burger, but you can do your report on the person who founded McDonald's. He got rich off of hamburgers and fries. Awesome, my kind of dude, Connor said. Rose raised her hand. I love the fact that she's in all of my inclusion classes. Miss Gordon, when is all this due? Rose is the type of student who takes all kinds of notes in a bright red spiral planner and never misses a homework assignment. Relax, Rose. We've got until the end of May, and I'll walk you through each segment, one step at a time. Tomorrow, we'll talk about how to write your memories. Rose seemed satisfied, but I noticed she scribbled almost a whole page in her notebook. I'd give anything to do that, but working on stuff the teachers in the regular classes assign is just plain awesome. History class is even better than language arts class, even though the teacher, a man named Mr. Deming, has none of Miss Gordon's spark. Balding and pudgy, he's been teaching at the school for over 20 years, and kids say he's never been absent, not even once. Clearly, he loves what he does. His car is always in the parking lot when our bus rolls in and always there when we leave for the day. He dresses like a TV preacher, in 3-piece suits with vests most days. I've never seen him without a crisp white shirt and a colorful tie. I wonder if his wife picks them out. Some of them are really sharp. Mr. D loves history. He can quote facts and dates and wars and generals like somebody on a game show. I bet he could win on Jeopardy. The other students don't seem to like Mr. Deming much. They call him Dimwit Deming behind his back. I think that's sort of mean because Mr. D is really smart enough to run the quiz team. When Mr. Deming got to American presidents in class, I rocked. He gave the students a list of presidents and all their vice presidents and told us there would be a test in a week. Catherine read the names to me several times. I've never even heard of some of these men, she admitted to me as we went over the list the first time. Hannibal Hamlin was Abraham Lincoln's first vice president? Who knew? I memorized them all. When Mr. Deming gave the test, all I had to do was point to the right answers. He checked to make sure that Catherine wasn't helping me. I even finished before some of the others. While Mr. D was returning the test papers, he gave the class a few minutes of free time to sharpen pencils or stretch or talk. I was surprised to see Rose walking toward my desk. "How did you do on the test, Melody?" she asked. "I only got a 75. She looked disappointed. I'd gotten an 85, but I was so excited that she'd come over to me that I got all mixed up. So I pointed to the 5 and then the 8 on my board. She touched my arm, her eyes full of sympathy. "Don't worry," she said, "you'll do better next time." And she did this right in front of Molly and Claire and the rest of the class. There was no way I was going to tell her what I really got on the test. I tried to think of something to say so she'd stay longer. Pretty and shirt was all I could come up with using my lame board. I sure could use a word choice that said cool outfit, but somehow Mrs. V had overlooked that one. But Rose beamed. "You look nice today, too." I really didn't. I had on a faded blue sweatshirt and matching sweatpants. Mom hardly got me anything else these days. But I hate sweatsuits. If I could choose, I'd wear blue jeans with sparkly decals, a blouse with decorated buttons, and a vest. But I had no way to tell Rose that, so I just pointed to "thank you." Incredibly, she touched my arm one more time, and then she went back to her seat and her friends. Then the bell rang, class was over, and I had to go back to H5. No more inclusion, no more Rose, and 4 more hours of school left. Even Catherine left. She had afternoon classes at the university and hurried to get there on time. Mrs. Shannon was out sick that day, so I sat quietly with Ashley and Maria and Carl and Willie while we watched The Lion King. Again. I've seen it a million times. I can quote it. Then the substitute teacher gave us a math lesson. Addition. Again. When am I ever going to get to long division? I wondered what Rose was doing. It was a very long afternoon. And that concludes our 2 chapters for today. Hopefully I'll get on in another day or so, and we will continue reading Out of My Mind. If you haven't, get to the library, go check out a book, do some reading on your own. Make sure you enjoy these last few weeks, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great night.